Everyone, and welcome to our INDEP online talk with Michael Hicks on his new game, Dissent on Mars, and simulating post-capitalist economies with this game. Dissent on Mars is a new simulation game that lets players design dozens of different economies to live in, including a democratically planned economy. During this event, developer Michael Hicks will talk about his inspirations for the game, how democratic planning is simulated, challenges he faced during development, and future plans for the game. So here are a couple of links for the game. First of all, the Steam page. Then there's the overall website for the game itself, where you can find like anything. There's also a forum related to the game itself, so if you want to dig deeper into that, you can find that on the website. And then there's Michael's personal homepage as well. If you want to reach out to him, feel free. And with this, Michael, take it away.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here. I'm going to switch over to my slides here. All right, you see my slides? Good? Good?
All good. It works.
Good. Okay, great. Well, thanks for having me here. My name is Michael Hicks, and I'm an independent game developer and musician. I've been working in the game industry professionally for almost 14 years. All of the games that I've worked on have been a collaboration with my friend Gonzal, so we're a team of two. Usually he draws the art, and I'm usually doing the coding, design, and music. We've released games for Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo Switch, and PC. But here today, I'm going to be talking about the 11th game that I've worked on called Dissent on Mars. And like you heard earlier, it's a sci-fi life simulator where you create new societies unlike anything on Earth. So as soon as the game boots up, you're able to design how your economy and government will work on Mars. You can create market economies that encourage competition. You can create centrally planned economies. You can create democratically planned economies, which is what we're going to talk about today. And then within that, there are even more choices. You can make decisions about how people receive income. Should people receive income based on how much they work, or should just everyone receive the same income for need? There's quite a few decisions you make, and those decisions change the rules for how the game works. So once you finish designing your constitution, you'll actually colonize Mars. You get to build a colony, and then you bring in little colonists to live life inside of your economy and government. And so you get to actually control one of those characters, and you can take them through the planning process, which we'll do later, and really kind of get into the weeds with all the details in your economy. Before we get into the democratic planning part, I wanted to talk a little bit about the inspirations for the game, so you have a little better idea of where I'm coming from and maybe what I was trying to do. This has been a dream project of mine for quite a few years. And I would say that the inspiration was actually a bunch of different things that kind of swirled together. The very first inspiration would probably be real life. So when I was a kid, I was growing up here in the Midwest in America, and my dad worked at a factory here. This is actually a pamphlet from where he used to work, and he was a tool and die maker. He did a lot of fiberglass work, and they made like tailgates and doors for cars, things like that. And when I was a kid, this was kind of like NAFTA era, kind of 90s, early 2000s when the impacts of that were happening. And the factory where my dad worked, along with a bunch of the other factories in the area, closed shop and moved to other countries. So my dad's factory went to Mexico, and a few of the people went with the factory, but most people lost their jobs. And it really hit the area hard. We had the highest unemployment in Illinois. Illinois is a state here in America. I'm not sure how many, I think we have a lot of foreign people here, but it's right in the middle of America. And yeah, it's just, it was kind of hard to see all that because eventually the unemployment level went down, but people kind of went from working, middle class factory type jobs to working at McDonald's out the interstate, right? Unfortunately, like a lot of the area where I live still hasn't recovered from this. We have a poverty level, above the national average. People's quality of life have went down, and seeing all this happen as a kid kind of radicalized my politics, I guess. I wasn't intellectually thinking, oh, we need to replace the economic system. It was more of a feeling, something's not right here and things need to change. So that's kind of at the root of my interest in making this game. But as I grew older, I more and more tried to think through these things. How could a different economy work? And I started absorbing a bunch of different material. Basically, whatever I could find about people talking about a different type of economy, I would read it or watch lectures. Eventually, I was introduced to participatory economics, which I'm guessing most people here are familiar with. And the participatory planning procedure that they propose is pretty close to the democratic planning procedure I have in the game. It's a little different, but definitely big inspiration from their writing. Um, so that was the second inspiration, is kind of people's proposals. And then around this time I was reading that type of material, I was just kind of getting my feet in the door of the game industry. I released a couple of games for Xbox, and I was starting to become kind of dissatisfied with the state of video games. I was watching a lot of movies and consuming music and reading books that I felt like was giving me a new perspective of things in life. Whereas when I looked at the video games I was playing, I felt like I was just kind of, grinding to get like some piece of armor for my character or something, right? Like it didn't feel as enriching as all this other stuff I was consuming. And eventually I started wondering, man, I wish I could play games that offer me new perspectives on things. And I started thinking in that way. And all of a sudden I had this idea where all these things kind of came together. And I was like, man, somebody needs to make a game about this subject matter of like different economic systems, because games are systems. So it seems like video games are the perfect way to experiment with different type of economies or political systems, any type of social system. That seemed like a really inspiring kind of direction to take my work. So I was really on fire for this idea of trying to make a game about this subject matter. But that was in 2012 when I first had the idea. And you'll notice I didn't start working on this game until 2019. So I made some other games in that time, and I was always a little nervous about starting this game because I felt like I wasn't ready to start it. But eventually I just kind of bit the bullet and was like, you know what, let's just dive right in. And the development process was very trial and error. Ironically, I was worried about not being prepared, but I don't think anything could prepare you for working on a game like this. It was very experimental. A whole lot of, let's see if this works. Nope, that doesn't work. What about this? Well, that kind of works. We'll do a little bit of that and then try something else, right? That was pretty much the whole development process. And it took a long time to finally get the game done, but we eventually did it. Actually, the first year of development from 2019 to 2020, I was working on a game that was totally different from the one that shipped. I ended up scrapping all of my work because I realized that I was going in the wrong direction. So it was very kind of herky-jerky, but we eventually got there. At this point, we could talk about a lot of different aspects of the game, but I wanted to kind of keep the focus on the democratic planning part. I want to give a live presentation, but before we start that, I want to give a little bit of some prerequisite knowledge. I'm not sure how many people here are super familiar with how democratic planning works. I assume most of you, but just in case. So democratically planned economies, whenever you have an economy like that in the game, all of our productive property, which is going to be our natural resources, our workplaces, and our tools and equipment inside of the workplaces, like the oven and so on in this picture, all of that stuff is shared by everyone. It's owned commonly. So one of the goals of democratic planning is we're all going to come together and decide who gets to use what for what period of time and what products are we going to make with this stuff. So we're all working together to decide what products to make and which resources to use. At this point, I'm going to try and switch my window. One second. I don't use Zoom a lot, so bear with me. Okay, so this is the game.
We can see it. We can see the game.
See it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so this is actually a colony that I've been playing in my spare time. I've already kind of laid out the buildings and brought in my people. Actually, this is me right here. So this is Michael Hicks. The game's paused, but I'm taking a shower in my little house there. If I zoom out, we can see I've plopped down a bunch of buildings. It's not very pretty. I was in a hurry. But these are all houses where people live. And up here we have like little workplaces where people work. A little forest up here with the trees and rocks and so on. In the bottom left here, you can see a portrait. And that's the character that I'm currently playing as. So that's Michael Hicks, but there's actually over 50 colonists in this colony, but I'm controlling Michael. So I'm responsible for Michael's actions, and everybody else is going to like live their life on their own without any player involvement. Um, let's go ahead and I'm going to go to the what we call the allocation center. And this is the building where everyone comes together to create economic plans. So you can see here that this is a multi-step process. The very first process or the very first step that we need to do is the colonists need to fill out applications for where they want to work. And they will also signal how long they would like to work for the next day. So here's everybody in the whole colony, and they've all done that on their own. But I'm going to go into Michael Hicks's plan and see what he's done. So Michael Hicks has applied at the game studio, the recording studio, the film studio, and the book studio. You can see here there are little icons. The green icon means we've applied there. And to the right, you can see that I would like to work. Well, my Zoom's covering that. I think it says 7 hours. Yeah, seven. Here I can see. Or 8 hours. Sorry, 8 hours. So Michael Hicks wants to work 8 hours. And then all of these plans are then sent to what I call the allocation computer, which is like a supercomputer that processes all of the plans. And the way I've modeled it in this game is that the computer will then assess the applications and try to approve labor in the most efficient way possible. So it's going to try and make sure everyone's employed for the hours that they ask for. It's not guaranteed that they get that, right? But it's going to try its best to distribute the time and get everyone into the workplaces. So that's automatically taken care for it. That's automatically done for us. The next step is the production plans. And this is where the colonists will assemble inside each workplace, and they will elect someone to be the plan creator. So in this workplace, Heather Foley is creating the game studio plan, and she has signaled that we're going to make 4 puzzle games for the next day, 3 sports games, 4 simulation games, and so on and so forth. All the other workplaces have done the same. So here in the bakery, we can see they're planning to make 7 apple pies for the next day, 5 loaves of wheat bread. And then if we come over here, we can see the recipe for each product. So apple pie takes some apples, sugar cane, water, wheat, and 0.16 hours of labor time. So all of these plans are then sent to the allocation computer. And then the final step here before the computer analyzes them is the consumption plans. So each colonist in the whole colony will fill out plans for what they would like to consume for the next day. So here we can see Michael Hicks wants to consume 4 chicken tacos, some books, and a smartphone, right? And the goal here is that each colonist has needs. They have hunger needs, energy needs, social needs, and they want to consume enough products to fulfill those needs for the next day. So if I bring up this taco entry here, we can see to the right, if I don't plan to consume any tacos, only 15% of my hunger need will be fulfilled. So I would potentially starve. But as we turn the value up, we eventually get it to 100%, so I'll have a full tummy for the day. So all of the colonists make these consumption plans, and then all of this stuff is sent to the computer, the allocation computer, and they're going to analyze the plans to calculate the supply and demand for everything in the economy. The production plans give us the supply, the consumption plans give us the demand. It also knows how many natural resources can be used, and it knows the labor as well from the plans we submitted earlier. So the goal here is we want to make sure nothing in the economy is oversupplied or undersupplied. So let's analyze the plans and see what happens. So this first round of planning is unfeasible. We have 23 products that are undersupplied and 67 products that are oversupplied. So now the prices have been updated, right? So the prices either went up or down based on if we were making too much or too little. And now all of the colonists update their plans. So they've already done it. Actually, it's an automatic thing, unless you want to manually control it. So let's go back in here and see. Let's go back to the game studio. And you can see here that, remember earlier we were planning to make some puzzle games. Well, now we're not planning to make any. The price went down, and it looks like no one wanted to consume any of those. But people do want to consume sports games. We actually turned the production of that up. So the green arrow up means price went up. We need more of that. The down arrow means price went down. We need less of that. So all of these plans were adjusted based on the information, and now we can analyze the plans again. So this is like a back and forth negotiation, right? We have multiple rounds of planning. Each round, everyone can update their plans based on the new information, and we keep up this back and forth process until everything is feasible. Let's analyze this round and see if everything's okay. Okay, great. So this round is feasible. Nothing's undersupplied and nothing's oversupplied. So at this point, the entire plan's good to go. So we can submit it, and then everybody can just go and do whatever they propose to do. So I'm going to do that and start the clock of the game. Go up here, and we can see somebody's already in here working. Let's see where Lacey's going. Lacey's going to work maybe over here. So they actually go into work and they start making the products that were in the production plan. And once they make the products, they'll be sent to the distribution center where the colonists can buy them and then use them at their house, like I was doing down here, and that fulfills their needs. There's a lot of things we could talk about in this game. It's pretty complicated, but just for simplicity's sake, there's one other thing I'll talk about, which is there's a bunch of statistics here that show you things like how many people are employed. So here we have 37 people are employed, 15 are not seeking employment. So that either means there's not a job that they're interested in doing, or maybe they're lazy, right? So each colonist has different traits that determine how they behave. So lazy colonists tend to not want to work, right? We have income statistics. So here actually I think I have it set up where everyone just gets the same income for need. And income inequality is low. So it gives you economic inequality measurements. It'll tell you if there's like a big gap between the rich and poor, it'll detect that and feed data back to you about that. There's statistics about poverty, if anyone's in poverty. We have waste statistics. So if we overproduce a lot of products and there's a lot of waste, we can see how much here. There's statistics about natural resources, like how much has been depleted, if any natural resources are endangered. So ultimately, it's kind of a comparison game. You can make a bunch of different economies and governments, and you can kind of compare how each one of them perform. And you'll probably have to change your strategies to achieve certain goals. So here, there are goals that use those statistics. Like, so here you're trying to create a living utopia, create a real utopia that eliminates poverty, unemployment, government intervention in the economy, and more. And it uses all of them statistics that I was showing you. And maybe in one type of economy, it's really, really hard to get that achieved, but in another type of economy, it's a little easier to do that, right? So your strategy for how you play this game changes based on the type of economy and government that you have. I think that's all I'm going to say about that for now. We can talk a lot more about this game, but let's get back to the democratic planning side of things. So I'm going to exit out of this. And I'm going to share my slides again.
This has already sparked like a couple of questions, but I'm gonna wait for them until the Q&A session. Don't
Okay,
worry.
we'll have a Q&A session at the end. Yep.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, so that was a quick walkthrough of how the democratic planning procedure works. Now I want to switch gears and talk about some issues that I ran into while trying to implement this. I don't want to get too technical, but it's going to get a little technical, right? But I'm going to try and say everything in plain English. There's a bunch of things I could talk about. I could probably write a book about all the little things I ran into while I was trying to implement this. But I'm going to keep it to the main three categories of problems that proved to kind of be the biggest issue.
Super quickly,
Uh-huh.
you also published the devlogs in the forum, right? So if people really, really, really want to like go deep into, oh, okay, what were challenges and problems and so on, and how do you approach them, people can read them in the devlogs, right?
Yes, but I don't think I'm not sure I mentioned some of the things in this talk in those devlogs, but yeah, there are devlogs where I talk about a little bit of my journey. Yeah. So that's all on the website, and there's a link to that in the chat.
Okay, Just wanted to nudge people towards this just in case so
Yeah,
they know about it.
yep,
Yeah.
yeah, no problem. Thank you. So this is the first challenge that I ran into during development, and that was that was adjusting the production plans. So you'll notice that each round that we planned there, all of the plans were adjusted, but the production plans in particular proved to be a bit of a trick for me to get it to work right. There's a lot of issues. Um, you know, if it's not clear in what we just ran, the computer characters were adjusting the plans. But if the player can also manually adjust all of those plans, right? So there were kind of two issues within this. Players were having trouble understanding how much to adjust their production plans, but also the artificial intelligence that I programmed it was taking a lot longer than I wanted to reach a feasible plan because they weren't adjusting very accurately. Um, and to sum up the problem as simply as I can, what I saw a lot in testing the game is that people would come in and they would, do their first round of production plans, prices would update, and then they would come back into the plan and they'd be like, okay, so now how much do I need to adjust each product? Like it needs to go up or down, but by how much, right? If I'm making 5 apple pies and we need more, how much exactly should I be putting into the plan? And at first, I thought the price signals would be the guide for this. So because the prices move, that would be kind of used to help guide people in that direction. But what I saw happen in the testing sessions is that they'd see, okay, the price went up by 50%. That means we need to increase production by 50%, right? Like that was the intuition people had. But that's not necessarily what you want to do, right? There's no guarantee that the price adjustment is going to correlate with the quantity adjustment that needs to happen. So that was an issue. And then furthermore, there were like these little edge cases where the prices would not update at all. So then nobody's getting any kind of information about how much to move the stuff. So if you imagine a scenario where we're producing way too many apple pies or something, and the price just keeps going down, going down. We need less and less of that. Eventually, the price is going to hit a floor, right? So in this game, the minimum price is 1. Like prices never go underneath 1. And at that point, if we still need to lower production, the price isn't moving at all. So then the whole thing just falls apart. Then nobody has any idea like how much they need to move the products, and everyone's just lost. So I realized that there needed to be something here to clarify the exact quantity that needed to be adjusted on the production side of things. So the solution I came up with is that the allocation computer, whenever the people make these proposals for production plans, there's also that recipe that's attached. So the allocation computer knows that whenever you propose to make 1 unit of this, these are the inputs that are required. So the computer has a rough idea of how efficient everybody is producing certain products, and they know the quantities that everybody's proposed. So the computer just makes specific recommendations along with the price, right? So they'll say, okay, the new price of apple pie is 30, and we recommend this workplace to propose or to make 20 units instead of 50 or whatever it is, right? So there's an exact clear number that's being recommended to the producers, and that solved the problem, right? There was no more ambiguity, no more vagueness, and what I found was that the planning process became very quick at that point because that eliminated a lot of the guesswork that people were doing. One other point to this is most of the time in the game, you might just have one bakery, right? But it's also possible you can have multiple bakeries. And that makes the problem even more complicated if you just have prices, because everybody's seeing the same price. And it could be one bakery needs to reduce their apple pie production a little bit, but the other one needs to greatly reduce it, right? So there kind of needs to be some kind of coordination between all of these workplaces. And what I found was these amount recommendations helped with that because it would tailor the recommendations to each workplace. Otherwise, if you don't have that, for example, if the price goes up 50% and then everyone's thinking in terms of we need to increase production by 50%, you're probably going to miss that target because everybody's doing that. Hopefully that makes sense. So that was the first big problem that I ran into. And the second big issue that was a big pain was that sometimes the planning process would just go on forever. And sometimes that would be linked to what I was just talking about, right? If people don't have accurate enough information, they're missing the target marks, that'll just like make the process go on and on and on. But there's actually a whole bunch of reasons why this could go on forever. Um, the the example I usually like to give for this is gamers love to break things just for the sake of breaking it, right? I do this myself too. So this scenario is totally possible in the game. You could have like someone at the bakery propose to make 200 apple pies the first round, and then the next round they cut it back to zero, and then the next round they propose 200, and the next round they propose zero, right? And they keep flickering that value like on and off over and over and over again, and that will cause the entire process to just go on forever due to one bad actor who's trying to screw with it, right? Um, there are many other reasons why this can go on forever too, even if people are acting in good faith. Um, it's kind of a complicated topic, and from an engineering point of view, I realize that there needs to be some kind of way to guarantee that this process will always come to an end, no matter what. Um, but ideally, you want to try and preserve as much of the plan as you can. It didn't seem like a good idea to just say, okay, if this goes on for 20 rounds and we don't reach a plan, we can't have a plan at all, right? Because usually what would happen is it'd just be like a few problematic products that would be causing the whole thing to go on, but most of the products would be feasible and would be okay. So the solution I came up with here is actually pretty simple. There's a concept called round limits. And the way this works is if a product has never been feasible for a certain number of rounds, say 20 or whatever you want it to be, the allocation computer will detect that. It has like a counter in the background, and it will say, hey, this product hasn't been feasible, not one time in 20 rounds. That product is now forbidden from being included in the plan. And what that does is it basically isolates off these problematic areas of the economy where that's keeping the whole thing going on, and then we can let the rest of the thing, be feasible and finish out. Um, there's just one problem with this, and that is that it's possible that a product could be feasible for a while and then be unfeasible, so then the counter would reset. So in that case, I have a final kind of contingency plan, which is if the plan goes on for like a really long amount of time, at that point, we call the whole thing off and say, hey, we tried our best to come up with the plan. It's not feasible. We couldn't do it. So we're going to go ahead and exit gracefully from the process. That rarely happens, but it can happen, right? So this is kind of like an edge case scenario. Most of the time, that first round limit that I talked about that's on the product by product basis, that usually takes care of the problem, at least in my testing sessions. The third problem area isn't so much of a computer technical area as much as it is a human brain problem, and that is the game has a very steep learning curve. It takes a bit of an investment to understand how this game plays and to get into it. And there are, I would say, two different reasons for why the learning curve is so steep. The first one is like there's a lot going on in the game, so it's a bit of a challenge to be like, okay, where do I go to make this happen? There's a lot going on. But B, at a conceptual level, there's a lot of new ideas in this game that most people just have never considered, right? In my testing sessions, I tested with people who had no idea about any of this stuff, right? I always tested with just average Joe kind of gamers. And why I would always hear things like, for example, when the game starts talking about how all of the natural resources are shared among all of the workplaces, that's owned commonly, I would see it in people's faces. They would kind of like, oh, okay, like they really had to chew on that. And it just felt really alien to people, like a lot of the ideas in this game. So that contributes to the learning curve as well. Not so much of a gameplay thing, but just wrapping your head around the conceptual stuff. So my solution to this, unless I remove things from the game, the learning curve, that's the only way I see to make the learning curve go down. And I didn't really want to do that because it felt like I had already put the core essential stuff in there, and I didn't want to take anything out because I felt like it would hurt the game. So my solution here was to just try and ease the initial experience for new players. And I did that in a couple different ways. The first thing I did is I went through my texts in the game, and I took my hatchet, and I made sure everything was using layman's terms, plain English, right? If you start talking to people in terms of, we're calculating the social opportunity cost and we're going to make sure externalities are included, you start using all that economic jargon, man, you lose people immediately. You create this huge wall unless it's people like you guys that are familiar with it, the average person doesn't know what any of that stuff is. So I tried to make sure everything was explained in plain English. And I think I was successful in that because when people test the game now, nobody tells me, oh, that doesn't make sense. Now they just say that feels really weird to think about, right? I wasn't able to get around the weird feeling thing. I think it's just always going to be there. But I did that with the text. And then the next thing I did was I tried to, I made sure everything was automatic. So you'll notice in that quick playthrough that we did, the colonists were taking care of all the plans on their own. We didn't have to do anything. Everything in the game's like that. They can live their life on their own. You can place pre-made buildings, so you don't have to get into detail with that. I wanted to basically make it where you could just set up your economy, press the button, and then kind of watch how it plays out without having to get into all of the weeds of how all this stuff works. But to truly master the game and to achieve all of the goals, you'll have to, figure out how to manipulate things manually and, manipulate the economy to do certain things. But my hope is that because everything is automatic, people can go at their own pace and gradually kind of, warm up to more of the details. The third thing I did was I worked really hard on trying to ensure there was an in-depth tutorial. I went through 3 or 4 different iterations of the tutorial. And ironically, I mean, the tutorial we shipped with helped a lot. Like in my testing sessions, people were able to get into the game and play for a long period of time. But that was actually one of the issues when we shipped the game is I realized there was still some issues with the tutorial, but I'll get to that later. So these are the things I tried to do to ease the initial experience, but I must stress that the learning curve is still pretty steep, right? The learning curve is still a lot, so it's going to take a bit of investment for new players to get into this. So we finally launched the game on April 7th, just a couple months ago, and overall, I think it went okay. There were some pretty cool things that happened, and we also had some issues and some problems we ran into as well. On the positive side of things, we had some pretty good featuring on this Steam store. This is a picture of our game. It was at the very top of the popular upcoming list on the front page of Steam. The week it was coming out, we got a lot of really good traffic from that. I feel like we were able to build up a pretty decent sized audience. I get emails and stuff from people who've been playing the game, and I get people will say things like, it's making them think about new ways of running an economy and introducing new ideas. They enjoy, this game can be utopia or dystopia, right? And what a lot of people have told me is they really have fun making like capitalist economies, and then they'll make like Elon Musk and let him own all the workplaces and then watch everything go to hell, right? For some reason, people enjoy doing that. They get a kick out of it. Maybe it's like catharsis or something. I don't know. But there's people who are enjoying it, and we got some good press coverage too. We got a few mentions on some gaming websites, and I was actually on TV, local TV down here, talking about the game, and so all that was cool. But we did have some problems, some issues we ran into at launch. There's 2 categories of launch challenges that we've been running into. The first one is related to audience expectations. And unfortunately, as of right now, a pretty decent sized chunk of the audience of the people who've actually bought the game and played it have actually refunded it and have voiced frustration to me. And when I look through the refund notes, I can see why exactly they refunded it. And almost every single one of the comments that I get is something along the lines of, I thought this was going to be like other games that I play, but it's not. And I don't want to learn like a whole new genre, right? It's basically, they want the game to be one thing, and I'm trying to make it this other thing. And, they thought it was going to play like this other stuff, and then they get mad. And like I said, it does take a little bit of a learning investment. And some of these refund notes, actually, my favorite one was somebody said, this game feels like it's trying to teach me something, and I don't want to learn anything, right? So I'm going to refund it. That's literally like verbatim what it said. So I've been dealing with a lot of that, and maybe there's some ways I can describe what the game is a little more clearly to set people's expectations. But I do think that like there's so much stuff in this game that kind of goes against the grain of what people are used to, so many new ideas that, I'm not too surprised that some people are a little alienated, but maybe there's some work I can do to kind of clear some things up. As of right now, I'm not sure. It's still something I'm thinking about. The second challenge is that the learning curve is still steep, right? I talked about this earlier, and we still have more people than I'm comfortable with reporting that they're having a hard time getting into the game. But the good news is now I've got enough information coming in about where people are getting confused and stuck that I feel like I see what the solution here is. And for the last month, we've been working on a brand new tutorial that I think will solve the issues some of these people are having. And actually, I think we're going to go live with it hopefully this weekend. I was just doing some testing last week, and I think it's just about good to go. Um, so that kind of brings us to the future plans for the game. We're going to get the tutorial update out and hopefully help the people who understand what this game is and want to get into it, but are struggling. Hopefully this update will help those folks. I'm also starting to kind of test the waters and see if there's interest from universities, maybe using this in classrooms. Some friends of mine said that might be something I want to look into because I guess apparently at some universities they actually teach kind of unorthodox economics. So maybe this is a tool they would want to use in the classroom. If somebody here teaches at a university level and is interested in that, please reach out to me and let me know what you think. Beyond that, the plan is we're going to try and bring it to Xbox and PlayStation someday. We'd like to bring it to consoles. And we're hoping to keep growing the player base with some promotions on the stores. So a lot of my other games that I've shipped, usually how it goes is, the player base gradually grows over time. It's usually not a big day one. We've got a million people or whatever, right? It's something that grows over time. So I'm hoping that's the case for this game as well. And then finally, there's a lot of things I'd like to add to this game. I'd like to flesh out what's in there a lot more. There's other concepts I'd like to add. I'm not sure that's the best idea as of right now because of what I'm seeing. That's just going to make it even harder for people to get into the game if I add more content. So I might not do that right now, but maybe someday, we keep adding on and fleshing it out. But yeah, it's been a really awesome project to work on. I'm really proud of it. I've learned a lot from working on it. I have fun playing it, and I'm excited to see where things go in the future. So with that being said, hopefully I didn't go over my allotted time. But I'd like to kind of move into a Q&A session. So if anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to talk to me. And thanks again for having me. It was awesome to do this. And I appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Michael. I will now stop the recording.